We're here because we're talking about being committed, right? At auctions, you need to be committed. Doesn't matter if you're a buyer or a seller. This is an environment where people do exactly what they say they're going to do. And if they don't, there are some big ramifications behind that.
You're trying to understand what someone believes, even if you're trying to analyze their representations of the world. Should you pay attention to how they act or what they say?
Well, we've been dealing with a tricky situation. We were selling a property for a client in the last couple of months, and their motivations for selling were really strong. And it's very much a time-dependent situation. That's another thing about auctions. It fits everything into a beautifully quick timeline, and that's why you need to be committed. So the completion for this transaction was supposed to happen last week. Nothing. Silence. The buyer's gone quiet. The buyer's solicitor's gone quiet, not responding to the seller's solicitor. So what do? Completion has passed. Do you just hope that somebody performs under the commitment that they've made, or do you have to take action? And it was a really interesting thing. The guy we've got a WhatsApp group with him. The guy sent us a message saying, this has happened, what do we do? Piotr's initial response was, serve notice. That will force them to wake up, pay attention, and realign themselves with the commitment that they've made, right? Because failing to complete, bad, not good, breach of contract, blah, 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 fines, penalties, all these different types of things, nasty business. But serving that notice to complete, that's 10 days. That refocuses someone's attention. That's like, we're not letting you get away with not being a person of your word, not being a person of your honor. And I respond back immediately, go, agreed, send the notice, just see what happens. Because there's no downside to the seller in this situation. So why would you delay? Why are you focusing on a promise that was made 4 to 6 weeks ago that the person clearly isn't honouring? So you have to do something that snaps them back into reality, realigns them with the purpose that they've made this decision to buy this property.
Actions spoke louder than words, and that if you were interested in belief, and even if you were interested in analyzing belief, that it was better for you to look at how someone acted than what they said.
What happens if the auction buyer doesn't complete on the agreed date?
There are a couple of things that happen. Well, the first one, obviously, is that you serve notice. That gives them 10 days to pull their finger out, whether it's funding, whether they've got, scared of doing the deal, they're getting bidder's remorse. All of these different things can happen. A lot of psychological stuff takes place at auction. But if they fail to complete at the end of the notice, you then send them a legal letter reserving your right to do one of two things, right? The first one is go to court and get a judge to order them to complete. And that's forcing them to do a specific performance of the contract, okay? So it's a judge basically saying, there's a contract here, it's under auction terms and conditions, you've provided no statement or evidence to the transaction being fraudulent, misrepresentative, you've done none of those things. There's no contention here. You failed under your obligation. So I'm going to force you within X amount of time to complete this transaction. The other thing that you can do, and most likely the thing that a lot of people do, is they basically say, okay, you failed to complete, I'm going to take your deposit. Okay, that's a non-refundable deposit. Then I'm going to put it back into auction. If it sells for less than the price that it's just sold for, let's say for round figures, the property sold for £1 million in this first time, it's failed to complete, then it goes back to auction. Maybe it only sells for £920,000. That's an £80,000 difference between £1 million and 920. So now the person who failed to complete at £1 million owes the seller £80,000. That's a claim. That's a real loss that's taken place. So you can claim detrimental reliance on the contract for that £80,000 loss. So whilst you've taken their 10% deposit, which will be £100,000, you'll also be suing them for that £80,000. You can also pursue them for additional costs. So that's the cost of doing the second transaction. That's the auctioneer's fees. That's the legal fees. If you have finance, it's finance fees. If you paid another couple of months of council tax, it's those fees. All of that kind of gets loaded into it. So the consequences of failing to complete are high. So why is it important to make sure that somebody does exactly what they say they're going to do? Well, one, who wants to go through all that hassle? Who wants to go to court? Who wants to relist something for auction? You've already got your price. The deal's already done. You don't want all of this aggravation. That's why it's so important.
Why should the seller serve the notice quickly?
So the first thing, it's a big psychological thing, right? You don't want to give somebody space to start creating reasons, excuses, and arguments. You want to keep them on that narrow, you want to keep the train on the tracks, right? You need to get to the station. Completion station is where we're heading. That's the goal. Get it across the line. Okay, exchange is brilliant. That's like we always talk about. It's one of the most powerful things that auction gives you. It gives you an immediate exchange of contracts. But there's still work and effort that happens post-exchange to get you to completion. Keep the train on the tracks. You need to keep people focused. And it's the same thing. We've had the similar situation as buyers at auction, right? Where the seller isn't performing as we hoped they would perform. So we've had to kind of give them nudges and make sure the transaction goes in the way it should go. So I'd say the first thing is psychological. You don't want to give people the space to create an argument that isn't there. So by them failing to complete, you want to be serving them notice that day. That's not a mean thing. It's not a cruel thing. It is essential. You have that right in contract law. In the common auction conditions of pretty much every auctioneer, and your solicitor will put this into the special conditions of sale. So when the bidder is buying the property, they're buying it on these conditions. So all you are doing is you are following the terms and conditions of the transaction that they're not following. And it's important that, procedurally everything is done as it should be done, so that if there is an argument later on and it goes to court, you can say, look, Your Honour, they failed to do X, Y, and Z. We performed as we should, so we served notice. They failed to perform on the notice, and we did what we should. And we gave them the notice that we were going to proceed going to court for this remedy or this remedy. So these things are important. Creating that gap and that time, and they can use an argument to say, well, why didn't you pursue us? Why didn't you do this in time? What's wrong? Blah, blah, blah. And you don't want to create situations and arguments that aren't there. You just need to be able to go, right, this is the rule of the game. This is the process. I'm going to follow the rules. I'm going to follow that process. Because once it enters into the legal realms, there are no need for mind games. It's just do what needs to be done. Take the necessary action.
Hi, I'm Michael Allison, Commercial Director at Roma Finance, proud partner of Property Auction Hunters. Hope you're enjoying this episode and picking up those tips. If you need finance, we have our full product suite available. Please don't hesitate to get in contact on the details below.
Let's say that notice is served and the buyer started communicating, but they are saying that they might complete a couple of days after the notice expires. Do you give them the benefit of the doubt?
Well, look, the problem that you have and they have is that the 10 days notice, it's fixed. There's no negotiating that. So if they're unable to complete by that 10th day, the contract comes to an end, right? They forfeited their deposit. So in the example where it's a £1 million purchase and £100,000 deposit, that £100,000 deposit is forfeit, right? So you can turn around to them and say, look, you had the offer at £1 million. We accepted that. That was all done under auction terms and conditions. Now, if you want to buy it, you have to pay £920,000, right? Because you have to account for the auctioneer's fees. Because when that deposit is taken, it's taken less the auctioneer's fees. So you can't be out of pocket in this situation. But if you do want to engage with them, you have to consider a couple of things, right? First off, these guys or girls or whoever have made an offer, bought your property, not made an offer, they bought your property at auction for £1 million. Not only did they fail to complete, but they failed on the notice. So one of the things I'd be asking is, like, why? What took you so long? Show me evidence that you actually have an offer from a lender to buy this property. Otherwise, I'm entertaining you for nothing. There's no point me taking a second deposit from you. I'm not here to steal deposits. I'm here to sell this property and move on with my life and do the next deal or whatever the story is. So you want to kind of get clear on that. You want that clarity. And then you can negotiate with them. You can say, okay, well then let's re-exchange contracts at the 900. And then let's do a 1 week completion with a 1 day notice. Because you only need a couple of days. So why don't we just give you 8 days max to get this deal done? And if they're real about the deal, and you've kind of marked the price down to allocate for the fact that they've got their deposit out and you've allocated the fact that you've already out fees, and you can kind of carry on as if no one's really out of pocket-ish, then it's worthwhile doing that. But there is no way, once the notice is served, to kind of undo that and change it around, because it undermines your position legally. If you then try and give them an extra couple of days and they don't perform, then, you know, when you go to court, they could say, well, look, actually, you've undermined the notice, you've undermined the contract. It's not worth it. It's worth just being straightforward and honest with people, setting those defined boundaries, and making sure that if you are going to do a deal, you're doing it with committed people that understand how to do things. Because at that point, they're still just talking. And talk is really, really cheap, not just in auctions, but in any type of business. You need to just be able to follow through what you say you're going to do. And the moment that you don't, that's a breach of trust. So my concerns would be quite high, kind of working with that person to make sure this transaction goes through. I'd want undertakings from their solicitor. I think that would be an important step for me.
What happens if you are the buyer and you cannot complete on time? How do you handle this in the best way possible with the other side?
Okay, so I'm the buyer, I'm in breach of contract, I'm not going to be able to complete on time. Okay, spoiler alert, we've been in this position, right? It happens, right? Some things are just circumstantial. The situation can take you out of control. But I'll tell you exactly what we did. We engaged with our solicitor first and said, look, this is the position, we're not going to complete on time. Can you get on board with the seller solicitor literally right now? Like, don't delay. Make sure they've like communicate everything. We're not holding anything back here. This is our position. We're being honest. And, you know, you have to have the right solicitor in that situation. You can't have someone who's arrogant or aggressive unnecessarily. It's someone who can pick up the phone and have the conversation with someone and say, look, this is the position. My buyers need 3 more days. Can you accommodate? This is what's slowing them down. This is the timeline they've been given. I fully believe, you know, I've worked with them before, and this was a solicitor we worked with many, many times, still do. And he was able to basically give that seller solicitor the trust and the belief that we were able to pull this off. The other thing that helped is we also engaged with the auctioneers. You know, we say this all the way through, right? If you're interested in a property auction, engage with the auctioneers before the auction. Talk to people. Don't be like lurking in the dark and, you know, burying your head in the sand or trying to do things without engaging with people. It's the wrong way to do it. This was an auctioneer that we'd bought and sold through. I mean, for years, especially Piotr, for years had been buying and selling through this auctioneer. It's not that we were leveraging a relationship. We were reaching out to say, look, we're going to do it. This has happened. We're going to be 3 or 4 days late. Just if the seller reaches out just to get kind of like a steer on the situation, you know, just, you know, we're good buyers, we're good sellers. And we kind of laid all of the foundations so that wherever the seller went, because the seller's going to panic. Right? And you as a buyer, you're going to panic, right? Because you know you're walking into breach of contract. But it's keep calm, right? It's keep the train on the tracks. It's how do you get to where you need to get to without stressing, without acting in haste. And the first thing that you do is, you go, right, this is the situation. We're not completing on time. How do we make the situation work? That's it. Not how can we avoid it, not how can we can make it go. It's how we can make it work. And that's exactly what we did. And in that situation, the seller was actually very accommodating. I think we got an extra 3 days there from memory. And it's because literally, and this was before they really served notice. It was like the last couple of days of the actual contract that we were in. So because we addressed it early, before you get to those, you know, those good signs of, where are the keys, completion statement, draft transfer, we kind of knew, we're not in time here. And we thought, okay, if we engage with them before the notice kicks off, that's a far better position to be in. So we really kind of tackled it at the earliest opportunity. And that is really how you should behave. And you'll find actually that your solicitor is more comfortable handling the situation there. They're not really on the back foot yet. Once you're in notice or you're in the last couple of days of notice, your solicitor's going to feel like an idiot calling up that seller's solicitor. And if you engage the auctioneers early enough, they're going to feel comfortable. Look, I know these people, they bought and sold through us. They can't really give any guarantees, but it's all part of the storyline to make sure that you're resolving the situation the best way that you can. And it's so important. Do not bury your head in the sand. It's an action, but it's an action that doesn't take you anywhere. And remember, train on the tracks, get to completion station, and it all happens by communicating and making sure everyone's on the same page.
Okay, so what other actions can you take to demonstrate your commitment other than words and communication?
Okay, so if the the actions you've taken so far is just engaging with people and having conversations, right? Because that's just talk, but it leads to something. So if you want to create more of a committed activity, what you can do is you can do a couple of things. I've seen in the past, we haven't had to deal with this personally, I've seen in the past where a buyer was not going to complete on time. They had offered to cover the next month's finance on the property, the finance and council tax. They were basically saying, look, I've run over completion, I'm not meeting your expectations, let me cover your costs, whatever they may be, including your legal fees, for this section here. And some sellers accept that. They're like, okay, well, at least, I'm relying on this person, but they're actually doing something that is not going to leave me out of pocket, right? Because you have to account for these things. Like when you sell, you have to get your statement from your lender as to like how much debt is left that you have to pay off, right? These are important things. And I've seen other people basically say, look, I know my 10% deposit was £100,000. Why don't I give you an extra £50,000 deposit to hold? Bear in mind, this is coming off the purchase price. To hold, to give you comfort that I'm still here, I'm in the deal, I'm committing. So, offering to pay costs, that's a committed activity that gives the seller kind of an element of certainty that, okay, this person isn't messing around. I can still believe that they're in this deal. They're taking real steps. A little bit of pain to make sure that I'm going to make sure that they stay in the deal. And it's the same thing with paying an additional deposit. It's putting people in. You're basically saying, I'm committed, but I'm more committed. Something's not gone my way. The timings have gone awry, but I'm here, and I'm going to show you I'm here by putting more skin in the game. And those are really the two main ways, bigger actions, committed actions that you can take to give seller confidence that you're not just messing them around.
What are the key takeaways for both buyers and sellers?
Look, auctions are really simple, okay? There's no point focusing on what people are saying they're going to do. It's just focusing on what they actually do. That's the important thing. So that's a real strong takeaway from today. They are simple. Don't focus on what people say. Focus exactly on what it is that they do, okay? The moment a buyer starts going silent or their solicitor stops responding to your solicitor and you're getting close to the end of that timeline, serve the notice. Force the action. Make somebody respond to you. It's important that these things are done in the order that they're supposed to be done in to get the result that you're looking for, okay? And also, let us know in the comments, right? Have you ever dealt with a buyer who's disappeared? You've sold something at auction, maybe they haven't paid the deposit, maybe they've just kind of gone radio silent and they've disappeared, and how did you deal with it? Did you deal with it in the same way that we dealt with it, or have you got another interesting way that you've dealt with it? And obviously, you're at the end of the video, and if you haven't done so already, hit subscribe. And if you want more of these auction insights, you know what we do? We tell you how it is.